Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will be showing you how to crochet the basic mesh cardigan. It's an oversized crew neck cardigan with slip stitch details on the shoulders and sides and this beautiful button band that looks like double knitting. I will be making size small, but the written pattern, which includes sizes from extra small to 5XL, is linked in the description, so grab a copy and let's get started. For this project, you will need a 4mm and 2.5mm hooks, sport or DK weight yarn, and 6 buttons. My white sample is made with fine Peruvian wool, which is a sport weight, and for this tutorial I will be using Muskat by Drops, which is a DK cotton yarn. It's important that you hit gauge, which is 10 mesh squares by 10 rows, measures 10 by 10 centimeters or 4 by 4 inches. I was able to block my wool cardigan more than the cotton one, which is why I could use two different yarn weights. I prefer my wool version, by the way, because it's lighter and warmer. We will start by making the back panel, which is worked from the bottom up. Begin with a slip knot and chain 103, or the number of stitches indicated for your size in the pattern. After chaining 103, you can mark the last chain. For row 1, chain 6 more stitches and then double crochet into the 7th chain from the hook, which is the mark stitch, and this will form your first square. Next, chain 1, skip a stitch, and then double crochet into the next stitch. And you will repeat this till the end of the row. To start row 2, chain 4, then turn your work, skip 1 stitch and double crochet into the next stitch. That means you will skip the chain you have made in the last row and crochet into the double crochet you've made in the last row. Now chain 1, skip 1 stitch and double crochet into the next stitch. Continue this till the end of the row. At the end of row 2, make the last double crochet into the 5th chain from the chain 6 at the beginning of row 1. To start row 3, chain 4, turn your work, skip 1 stitch and then double crochet into the next stitch. Then again, chain 1, skip 1 stitch and double crochet into the next stitch. For size small, you will work row 3 a total of 23 times until you have 25 rows. And remember, if you want to adjust the length, now it's the time to do that. Once you finish the length, it's time to shape the armholes. For the armhole decreases, chain 2, turn, skip 1 stitch and double crochet into the next stitch. Then again, skip 1 stitch and double crochet into the next stitch. Continue in the mesh pattern till you get to the last square. When you get to the last square, skip one stitch and triple crochet into the next stitch without chaining one in between. You will repeat this row you just did a total of 3 times for size small, and after the armhole decreases you should have 28 rows. Once we finish shaping the armholes, we will continue crocheting without any decreases. For size small, we will crochet another 17 rows in the mesh pattern, maintaining the same stitch pattern throughout. That means chain 4, skip 1 stitch and double crochet into the next stitch, then chain 1, skip 1 stitch, double crochet into the next stitch till the end of the row. You should now have 43 rows, and now it's time to decrease for the shoulders. You will chain 5 and turn, then you will skip 3 stitches or 2 squares and double crochet into the next stitch. Then you will continue in the same mesh pattern, that means chain 1, skip 1 and double crochet into the next stitch till you have 2 squares remaining. At the end of the row, you will skip 3 stitches again and triple crochet into the next stitch. Work this row you just did a total of 8 times to finish shaping the shoulders. You will decrease 2 squares at the start and at the end of each row. Once the back panel is complete, we will add trimming along the sides using 2.5mm hook. You will begin the trimming at the top of the back panel where the shoulder decreases end. First chain 1, then start by making 5 slip stitches along the mesh spaces created by the shoulder decreases, and when you reach the point where 2 mesh lines intersect, make 1 slip stitch directly into that intersection and continue this. That means 5 slip stitches into the mesh holes part and one slip stitch into the intersection till you get to the straight part of the mesh. Once you reach the straight side of the back panel, make 2 slip stitches inside the mesh squares and 1 slip stitch at the intersection, and continue this along the straight part, then along the armhole decreases, and then along the second straight part. At the end of this row, chain 1 and turn. Once you turn your work, you will work slip stitches into the back loop only of the stitches from row 1. Slip stitch into every back loop till you get to the end of the row, then chain 1 and turn. Work this row a total of 7 times. This is how the finished trimming should look. And now repeat this on the other side, but don't start at the top of the shoulders, but start at the bottom corner. Now let's work on the front panels. For size small, start by chaining 51. Just like the back panel, after you chain 51, you will chain 6 and double crochet into the 7th chain from the hook. Then continue the mesh pattern by chaining 1, skipping 1 stitch and double crocheting into the next stitch. And you should end up with 26 squares at the end of row 1. Work the front panel in the same way as the back panel, following the mesh pattern until you have 25 rows. After completing the length of the front panel, it's time to shape the armholes. The armhole shaping for the front panel is a bit simpler than the back because you only do it on one side. For the first row of decreases, chain 2, skip 1 stitch and double crochet into next stitch. Then continue the usual mesh pattern, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next stitch across the row. For the next row, continue with the classic mesh, so chain 4 at the start, skip 1 stitch, double crochet into the next stitch, then continue with the mesh pattern as before, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next stitch until one square remains, then skip 1 stitch and triple crochet into the next stitch. Then repeat the first decrease row one more time, so you will start with chaining 2. So you have 3 decreased squares. Then continue without decreases for another 15 rows until you have 43 rows in total. Now it's time to shape the neckline. For the first decrease row, chain 4 at the beginning, skip 1 stitch and double crochet into the next stitch. Then continue with the mesh pattern, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next stitch until you have 2 squares remaining at the end of the row. When you reach those 2 squares, just ignore them and continue with the next row. For the second row of decreases, chain 2 at the start, skip 1 stitch and double crochet into the next stitch and continue with the mesh pattern across the row as usual. Then also continue as usual the beginning of row 3, but continue with the mesh pattern until one square remains. Then skip 1 stitch and triple crochet into the next stitch. Then repeat rows 2 and 3 one more time. Then continue without decreases for another 8 rows. You should now have one row where you skipped 2 squares, 4 rows of decreases and 8 rows without decreases. Now make the trimming on the side with the armhole shaping. Start the trimming at the top, then repeat all of the instructions for the front panel to make an identical second front panel, but start the trimming at the bottom of the panel. Now that the back and front panels are complete and trimmed, it's time to seam them together. Make sure the wrong side of the front panels is facing the wrong side of the back panel. Now seam the sides and the shoulders. I like to use the mattress stitch for this as it creates a clean, invisible seam. This is how I seam the sides, but I'm not the best at seaming, so I will link some tutorials in the description. Feel free to use some stitch markers to make sure everything is aligned. And this is how I seam the shoulders. I would definitely use stitch markers for this. With the panels now joined, it's time to add the bottom ribbing. Attach your yarn at the bottom corner of one of the front panels and chain 14. Skip the first 2 stitches and half double crochet into the next 12 stitches, and when you reach the end of the row, make 3 slip stitches along the bottom of the cardigan. The first slip stitch will be in the mesh intersection, the second one in the mesh hole, and the third one again in the mesh intersection. Now turn your work and skip the 3 slip stitches you just made. Now work back across the row, making 12 half double crochets into the back loop only. At the end of the row, chain 2 and turn. Now again make 12 half double crochets into the back loop only, and then 3 slip stitches, and continue this all the way to the other end of the bottom of the cardigan. Now for the button band, it's make exactly the same as the trimming, so I didn't film it. But you attach your yarn at the top of the front panel and then slip stitch evenly along the edge of the mesh pattern, making 2 slip stitches inside each mesh square and 1 slip stitch at each intersection, and then work a total of 17 rows of slip stitches in the back loop to make the first button band. And now for the second button band with the buttonholes. You will repeat the process, but this time only work 8 rows of slip stitches into the back loop, and then mark the positions for your 6 buttons, spacing evenly. When you have 2 stitches remaining until your stitch marker, You will chain 5 and skip 5 stitches and then continue slip stitching, and you will repeat this at every stitch marker. Once the buttonholes are made, continue with 7 rows of slip stitches into the back loop. Now for the neckline band, it's exactly the same as the trimming and the button band. Attach your yarn at the top of one of the button bands and then you slip stitch evenly along the neckline. First slip stitch in the button band in between the braids, and then it's the same as the button band. Now for the sleeve, attach your yarn at the bottom of the armhole and start working in rounds. First chain 4 and then skip 2 stitches and double crochet into the next stitch. You may use a smaller hook for the double crochet because the trimming is very tight. Now chain 1, again skip 2 slip stitches and double crochet into the next stitch. Repeat this pattern around the armhole. When you have 2 stitches remaining, chain 1 and slip stitch into the third chain of the starting chain 4 to join the round. For the next round, chain 4, skip 1 stitch and double crochet into the next stitch, and continue in the same mesh pattern for the sleeve. For size small, work 43 rounds or until your sleeve is about 5 centimeters shorter than your desired length. Now just a little visual of the optional decreases. You don't have to do this, just if you want to taper your sleeve a little. Start by chaining 2, skipping 1 stitch and double crocheting into the next stitch, and then continue with the basic mesh pattern all around the sleeve. And when you have 1 square remaining, chain 1 and slip stitch into the second chain from the beginning chain 2. Then you can just continue normally for a couple of rows and maybe do some more decreases if you want. Once your sleeve is the desired length, we will add the ribbing. The ribbing is exactly the same as the bottom ribbing. So attach your yarn at the end of the last mesh round and chain 14. Then skip the first 2 stitches and half double crochet into the next 12 stitches and then slip stitch in the 3 stitches from the last round of the sleeve. Now skip the 3 slip stitches, turn your work and half double crochet into the back loop of next 12 stitches. Then chain 2 and turn and continue this all around the sleeve. When your ribbing is done, just sew the beginning and the end using mattress stitch.